Hello everybody! Happy fall. My favorite time of year. I've been loving it. If you're new here, my name is Catherine and I'm here to talk about books. Some exciting personal news. I just got a new day job! Yes! Yes! I am so excited. I have needed a new day job for a minute now. You know, when it's just time to go, and it's really time to go. It's been time to go, but just got a new job. So I'm very, very, very excited. That means I will be busy getting ready to go to that job, be in that job, and that's also why these videos have been a little less frequent than I would like, because I've been in that job hunt mode. I've secured the bag. That took some time, and it's going to take some time to acclimate to the new one. So it might be a little touch and go in terms of how much I upload, but I still want to keep uploading and still do my thing while I transition in this new part of my life, and I'm just so excited. Yay! It's my September wrap-up. This is what I read for the month of September. It was a very good month. I read 4 books, as per usual. I feel like that is my average. I really average at 4 books per month. And these were great reads. I had a great time. So I'm going to go in and talk about each of them. Get comfy, get a snack. Oh, wait. Oh, I don't have my coffee. Hold on. We're not doing this without my coffee. How could I be so foolish to go without my coffee? I got a coffee percolator for my grandmother because she swears by a coffee percolator. And it does, in my opinion, make the best coffee. So I've been making a lot more coffee at home, and it's definitely saving me some books. Anyway, let's talk about the books that I read for September. We read some good stuff. Starting off, I teased this a little bit in one of my other videos that I had just finished, or had just finished, but was saving it for my September wrap-up. Normal People by Sally Rooney. I want to give Sally Rooney an apology. Let's just start off with that. When I first heard of Sally Rooney, it's when Book Talk and BookTube and the online discourse about books was really blowing up. And I feel like Sally Rooney was getting lumped in with a lot of other contemporary female writers. I think she was in similar conversations about Colleen Hoover and about Emily Henry and these other authors that I personally just don't have that much of an interest in. I'm not really a romance person. I don't seek out romantic books. And so when I saw her name in those kind of conversations, I was like, oh, I'm not really interested, or that seems like it might be kind of pulpy and I don't really want to read it. I owe her an apology, I should say, because this book was so well written. This was excellent, excellent writing, and I don't know if it's necessarily fair to put her in the same camp as some of these other writers. Colleen Hoover. Oh, sorry, I have a little something in my throat. If you are unfamiliar with Normal People, where have you been? But basically this is about 2 young people living in Ireland, Connell and Marianne. They go to the same high school, but they're not friends. They kind of have a situation where Connell's mother comes to clean for Marianne's family. So they know each other at school, but they don't know each other too well, but they strike up this one conversation one day, and then from there, a relationship blossoms. And at school, Marianne is much more of an outcast. She doesn't have any friends. She's very withdrawn. People think she's weird. Connell plays football, or soccer to us weird Americans. He plays football at school. He's very popular. He gets along with everybody, and he doesn't really want anyone to know that he's basically been seeing Marianne. They wind up both going to Trinity College in Dublin, and while they're there, relationships to them kind of reverse. Marianne kind of blossoms. She really fits in at Trinity, she has friends, and Connell is finding himself to be a little bit of an outsider. But throughout their young adulthood and them transitioning in this part of their lives, they always somehow are drawn to each other. They're never quite together, but they can never quite stay apart from each other. And it's just about how 2 young people can be attracted to each other in such a way, but also can't quite communicate what the other person is to them. It's about how what one person can mean to you. This is a story about class, this is a story about sex, about love, about just being young. I was reading this book and I was like, these poor people don't have their frontal lobes developed, and they're making decisions like their frontal lobe is not developed. And that's why I think a lot of people that read this and get frustrated with it are upset that the characters don't communicate. But to that I say, that's the whole point. The fact that this is Irish is very significant. I think the Irish identity in this book is a huge part of it. I studied abroad in Dublin when I was in college. I studied theater there. And this, of course, does not make me an expert at all in Irish culture. It's not like I was there for 5-6 months, was like, oh well, in Dublin. But there is a way people communicate here, and there is a way that people say things that actually mean something else when they actually probably feel very deeply about it, but they can't quite say it. To give an example, my friends and I went out for for drinks and went out to a club, and we just kept noticing that men would like stand next to us or like stand up against us, and we were kind of like, okay, like, hi. And we went to class the next day, and we were like talking about that we were going out, and our Irish teacher was like, oh, did the men like stand up against you and like not say anything? And we were like, yeah. And they're like, oh, that's because they like you. They can't say it, but they like you. And I'm like, oh. And I guess because in the States we're used to men being a little bit more forward, or just at least like saying hi, or like, do you want to dance? But just like the Irishmen just like stood up against us, like, and was just like waiting for us to do something, but not broaching the subject. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of people that just like can't quite say what they mean, and that makes up a lot of the issues and the problems in this book. These two characters deeply care for each other, but they can't quite just say to the person, you're my whole world, like, let's just be together. They can't quite say it. So it leads, you're reading it and you're like, come on! But that's the point. Their age is significant as well, because I also remember when I was 17, 18, in my early 20s, I couldn't always spit out if I did like someone. I would want to like be around someone for a while and like just be in their presence and find excuses to stay with them, but I could never be like, hey, I really like you. Do you want to make out? Like, I was always someone too that was like, oh, I can't say it. I'm also Irish American, so I guess that's just baked into the DNA. But the characters were so well fleshed out in this book. They did feel like real flesh and blood people, and I feel like I say that with a lot of books, but truly with this one, like, they felt very real. I really felt for Marianne. I thought her situation was so sad and so frustrating. Like, the way her family treated her was so frustrating and terrible, that then the reasons that she did things, or the reasons she acted certain ways, why she would be withdrawn, or that she like maybe didn't let a lot of people into her life, to me made a lot of sense. Connell, on the other hand, I got a bone to pick with Connell, because he came from a loving family, but he has like kind of a chip on his shoulder because like the legacy of his family in their small town is that they're kind of a troublesome family. People in the family always got into trouble. And so I think he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder trying to prove that he's not that, and then he and his mom are not that. But he still has, like, his mom is very supporting, and like, and is like a very like cool mom, like cool laid back mom. And he just, like, the way he acted towards Marianne and the way he interacts in the larger group, the larger society, is that he's just very insecure. He's just insecure about his placement, about who he is as a person. And it just is to Marianne's detriment. And so, while I understood where Marianne was coming from, and maybe I'm biased because I'm like, girl, but Connell, I was like, dude, come on, like, get over it. The fact he didn't want anyone to know that they were going out in high school, I'm like, oh, that's so high school. Like, that's so, like, I can't be seen with that person. People are gonna talk. When you as an adult are like, literally no one cares. Like, literally, actually nobody cares. But in high school, it is that kind of like, you get into that mentality. But that, to me, I was like, that's why this book was so good, is because they felt like real people with these real actual stakes and these real actual problems that people would come across in high school and in college and in young adulthood. And I just loved like the dialogue. I just like, I got sucked into this book and could not stop reading it. It was incredibly compulsive. And I finished it in like a couple days. Like, I just sped through this. And I do really like her style. I know her style is a bit divisive. I know some people don't like it, but I liked it. Like, I just gotta say, I was into it. And now I'm like, am I a Sally Rooney girly? I think I might be. Like, I want to pick up conversations with friends. Maybe Beautiful World, Where Are You? And then I've heard nothing but good things about her new book, Intermezzo. So, we're on the train. Choo choo. Chugga chugga. We're leaving the station. It's Sally Rooney Express. I quite enjoyed this. So, surprising. This honestly surprised me, but I quite liked it. Normal people. My camera's about to die. I gotta charge it, and I will be right back. We're back. Fully charged. Next up, we have The Pure and the Impure by Colette. I read this for my book club. I gotta say, I can see why this is a classic. I can objectively see why this is well written, but I think a lot of this went over my head. Colette is a French writer. I was familiar with her work a little bit when I took French in high school. We read parts of, she had a very famous series, what are they called? Claudette books? Claudine books? She had a famous series of like about a French girl. And I remember reading passages of that for my AP French exam. So that's the only kind of any kind of exposure I've had to Colette, but I've never read a full-fledged work of hers. And so this was my first one, and I gotta say, I don't think this is the one to start with. Her writing is a very particular style, and I think this is her pretty far advanced in her style. And I was like, oh, we've never read any of her stuff, like we are not familiar with this at all. I found this one to be challenging, and it did give me some consolation that when I went to the meeting, everyone else was also like, this one was difficult. So basically this is about Colette. It's kind of autobiographical. It's about Colette kind of living in the bohemian kind of underground world of Paris in the 1920s. And it talks just about like different people that she knows and conversations she has with different people, different artists, about desire, and how that makes people the pure and the impure. There's a lot of talk about homosexuality in the 1920s in Paris, which gave an interesting insight because that's just such a niche specific time, and I don't know that much about the world of homosexuality then. So it spoke about men having relationships with men and women having relationships with women. And like in theory, that all sounds like something I'd be really into, which is I don't think I voted for this book, but was happy it was in the running and happy to read it when it came up, because in theory that all sounds like stuff I would be interested in, but I think the execution of it I was not super into. It depended on which vignette it was. There were all different chapters of these different vignettes, and they were all strung together by theme, but not necessarily, there's no plot. This was all just like Colette kind of philosophizing and espousing her theories on gender and desire at this time, but it's not plot based. And some of them, like her conversations with men, I just found to be kind of boring. Like I was like, I don't really see the point of this. There's one conversation she has with this man who's like a famous actor and plays Don Juan, who's like a very stereotypical ladies' man, a womanizer. And like that was just, I was like, okay, like I don't care. There was one chapter in this though that was amazing, and I was like, I wish there was just a whole book of this chapter. It's this chapter where she talks, it's not anyone she knows. She like goes into a bit of a history lesson about these two women in the no, not the 19th, in the 18th century, who were both kind of from like aristocratic families, but they were in love with each other and they ran away with each other to go live in Wales, and they like lived in seclusion, like basically lived as cottagecore lesbians in the 18th century. And just the way it was written too was like kind of magical and mystical. And it was talking about how the one woman in the relationship was the one that did all the correspondence, that was the one writing the most about it. But she was like, I wonder what the other woman felt about this relationship and if she was happy in it, as happy as this other woman touted that they were. And it was so good. Like that chapter, and that's the one we talked about the most in the group. We were like, this chapter was everything because it just had a different tonal feel than the rest of them, even though she didn't know them. Like it was just kind of a musing on like, here are two women who just decided to like leave society so that they could be together. It was great. Like that chapter was great. There's also a really great chapter about someone that she did know who was this like kind of bohemian, like kind of poet woman, upper class in Paris, who was a lesbian and who was also very suicidal. And it was talking about like her descent into finally doing the deed. And that chapter was like really moving and really good, but then the rest of them just like didn't catch me, and I found I was kind of looking just to finish this one off. The prose is really dense, is like very, very dense, makes a lot of references to things that like if you aren't from her time you might not know what she's speaking of, and I found it like a little bit esoteric and a little bit just removed. Like I wasn't getting fully engaged because the prose kind of wouldn't let me do that. There were some like great lines in here that I would like read and then go back into and be like, oh, okay, I get what it's saying now. But some paragraphs took me, like I had to kind of reread and reread. So I liked this. I did not love this. This was a 3-star read for me. I am like keeping it because I'm like, it's cool to have Colette on the shelf, and like I would want to read more of her stuff, but I don't think I'm going to anytime soon. So I'm tempted to unhaul this, which mad about because I bought this new. I bought this for full price. Though I was supporting Exile and Bookville, which is a great bookstore and I'm happy to support them. But I am kind of like, ugh, of all the ones to get full price, like I'm kind of mad I ooze this one. I haven't put my little like stamp in that says in the library of Catherine Healy because I am undecided if I want to hold on to this. Push comes to shove, if I do have to do a purge of books at some point, which I'm probably due for, this might get removed because I just wasn't a huge fan of this. So, The Pure and the Emperor. Next, we have one that I brought up in my first lines of TBR video, and I was like very close to reading it at the time because the first line of this book was unreal, but I picked Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead instead, and that felt like the right book for that time, and this just was the right time to read this book. It was The Death in the Family by James Agee. I loved this. I loved this book. I ate it up. That first line, it got me in. It pulled me in. We are now talking of summer evenings in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the time that I lived there so successfully disguised to myself as a child. Like, if that doesn't get you, disguised to myself as a child, this book is miraculous and is a miracle that I'm even like holding it in my hand. James Agee does not have a lot of published works, unfortunately, because he passed away very early. He passed away in his late 40s from a heart attack, which is insane to me, but it's because he was a very, very heavy drinker. He is known for screenplays. He wrote The African Queen, which I have yet to see, and he, I think with Charles Laughton, is that how you pronounce his name, Charles Laughton? I think together they basically wrote Night of the Hunter, which is one of my favorite movies ever. It's so good. I read that he wrote the screenplay, and the screenplay originally was going to be 8 hours long. And that's where I think the director came in and was like, buddy, we gotta cut down on this. So there's like a little bit of discrepancy on who wrote it, but I think he was the one who like wrote the original screenplay, like wrote the full thing. And then I think Charles Laughton came in and just like trimmed it to being, I think it's like a 2-hour movie. One of the, so good. So good. And so once I learned that, I was like, oh, then I absolutely have to read this man's work. And this was just amazing. The writing in this was beautiful. And what's so crazy about this book is that it was not published yet by the time of his death, but he basically had it as a manuscript. And when they found it, they were like, this is almost perfect. Like, it doesn't need any edits. There were just a couple of vignettes that he had written but hadn't placed yet in the novel. So the publishers were like, we'll just kind of stick them in. One of them at like the very end of part 1, one at the very end of part 2. And then we'll stick this other one, which was just titled Knoxville Summer 1915, as a prologue. And they were like, that's all we can really do. Like, we can't really make too many suppositions, but like, we want to include these pieces because they're so strong. So what you have basically, except for those like very almost dreamlike pieces at the end of part 1, part 2, and the prologue, the rest of it is just like he wrote it and it was ready to go. Like, can you imagine that? He just like had this manuscript and they look at it and they go, no edits. Just put it to print. Like, he was that good. And this book was just, it was so moving, so minute, and so specific. And the writing was just, it was just stunning. It was just gorgeous. So this basically follows a family in Knoxville, Tennessee, 1915. Jay Follett is the patriarch of the family. He has 2 young children and a wife. He gets a call in the middle of the night from his brother that their father is very ill and like is at death's door. So Jay is like, well, I have to go. So it's like very early in the morning. He tells his wife, I gotta go see my father because this might be it. And I'll be back later tonight. And she's like, okay, cool. So he drives out. He's literally driving like a Tin Lizzie, one of the like really first cars. He drives out there, but then on his way home, he gets into an accident and is killed instantly. And so this is about, like, I thought that accident would come a lot earlier, but it really didn't come until the middle. And then the rest of the book is just how the family is dealing with the immediate grief of it, like the learning of the news, waiting for him to come home and not getting any news, getting the news of his death, going to, like, starting to go to the funeral. Like, it just deals with the immediate impact of this death. And it's so incredibly moving. You get, almost like Virginia Woolf and Mrs. Dalloway, how you go into people's consciousness and you kind of weave in between people's experience of something. That's happening here, that he does that a lot. So you get to see it from his son's point of view, Rufus, who's like 6 when this happens. He even goes into the youngest, whose name is Catherine. You go into Catherine's perspective, she's about like 4. It goes into the wife's perspective, her aunt, Hannah, who's like an old spinster who's helping them out, it goes to hers. So it just like flows beautifully between all these, or amongst all these characters. And you just, even though you only got a little snippet of what he was like, because he has that whole scene in the beginning with his wife where he's like, I gotta go see my dad, you still through them get a picture of who he is, just in how they're reacting to his death, or the fear that he might be dead. And they were just such beautiful singular characters. Especially Rufus was just like a very peculiar child and you got that through all these interactions that he has with kids when he finds out his father has passed away, and how he talks to them about it, and how he was like, oh, maybe these kids they tease me, but maybe they'll be nice to me now because my father's dead. And he wrote for children so beautifully, because like they were starting to grasp what that means, and the wife is like trying to like explain it to them the best way that she can, and she's trying to hold herself up by telling them like, your father is not going to come home anymore. And the way he wrote for the children, and the way that they were like slowly piecing together what that actually means and what that magnitude means, it was so heartbreaking. Especially the little girl, because like she's 4, so there was a part where she was like, oh, like I'm wondering where's daddy? Like, where is he? And then she was like, oh right, he's not coming back. Like, and how she sat with that. Like, there were so many instances of that. And the sequences that are at the end of part 1 and part 2, the ones that the publishers didn't quite know where to put, were so stunning. It was a complete departure in how the rest of the book was told, because the rest of the book is very much like introspective, psychological, like what's going on in everyone's minds while they're digesting this thing. But these sections which they're delineated by putting them in italics, feel very dreamlike, and like almost like a dream ballet, or feels very, very vague in terms of space and time. The one after part 1 was so gorgeous. It was about Rufus having a nightmare. I think he was supposed to be a little bit younger in this memory, and his father comes in and like sings to him and like is helping him. And it just, because obviously the dramatic irony, like that this man is going to pass away, like it just makes this scene so incredibly touching. And just listen to this sentence, and just like it's unreal. And somewhat as in blind night on a mild sea, a sailor may be aware of an iceberg, fanged and mortal, bearing invisibly near, by the unwarned charm of its breath, nothingness now revealed itself. That permanent night upon which the stars, in their expiring generations, are less than the glinting of gnats and nebulae, more trivial than winter breath, that darkness in which eternity lies bent and pale, a dead snake in a jar, and infinity is the sparkling of a wren blown out to sea, that inconceivable chasm of invulnerable silence in which cataclysms of galaxies rave mute as amber. Kill me! That is amazing! That writing is... Oh my god. Invulnerable silence in which cataclysms of galaxies rave mute as amber. Like, how beautiful is that? Darkness said, when is the meeting, child? Where are we? Who are you, child? Who are you? Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? Child, are you? Oh my god, like, come on, James, come on. There was one part in this that, look, not to get too personal, but like, I don't know if I want children. I'm very much on the fence. But if this made any case for it, this is the case for it. This is maybe like one of the most beautiful sentiments about having children that I've read, that's been put into words. How far we all come. How far we all come away from ourselves. So far, so much between, you can never go home again. You can go home, it's good to go home, but you never really get all the way home again in your life. And what's it all for? All I tried to be, all I ever wanted and went away for. What's it all for? Just one way, you do get back home. You have a boy or a girl of your own, and now and then you remember, and you know how they feel. And it's almost the same as if you were your own self again, as young as you could remember. Jesus. The concept of having a child that reminds you of you being young again, and that brings you back to that home that the home of childhood and the home of being young that you can't get back to. I was like, oh, like I'm getting choked up thinking about that now. That's insane. I can't top that. Like I really can't. It just is so beautiful, and it made it just all the more tragic because like these like more poetic vignettes or these more like tender scenes at home then of course just highlight what we all know is about to happen, and it's just so heartbreaking. This was unbelievable. This really was unbelievable. If you like family dramas, if you like Virginia Woolf's work, if you like a very almost stream of conscious but very psychological internal worlds, if you are looking for just like a hint of poetry and some beautiful writing, and just something that is just so personal. Like it just feels like you really entered these people's lives and it's so personal. Would caution if you have had a death in the family, this might be a lot. But oh my god, this was amazing. James Agee, gone too soon. Like the fact that he was writing this kind of stuff, he could have given us so many more things. And he was unfortunately taken from us too soon. I just got, which will be in a vlog that will go up a little bit later, I got Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, which is written by him and Walker Percy, I believe. That's a nonfiction account about families in the Great Depression, about sharecropper families. So I got that. So I'm just gonna read everything he has. If he has short stories, like I am gonna pick up more of his because this was incredible. Huge recommendation. A Death in the Family. So good. Okay, and the last book that I read for September, I finished this up right before the month was out. I read The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. If you watch my fall TBR video, I talked about how I wanted to read this. To me, for some reason, fall is a time for sci-fi. I get in a very sci-fi mood in the colder months. So this was on my list, and I really liked this. This was really good. This is about Shevek. He is a very famous physicist, and he lives on the planet Anaris, which is like it's a very desert type planet, and they're run by anarchism, like very communal anarchism. And he really wants to like know about their sister planet, Euros, which is kind of right across the way. He explains that they're basically, these planets are each other's moons, and he wants to visit Euros and kind of bridge the gap between these two worlds and bring them together. And to do that, he has a very like specific physics theory that he's been working on and that he maybe can bridge the gap. So he goes to live at Euros as like a visitor and as a professor there. And Euros is a bit more, it's not Earth, but it's like Earth in the geography and also a bit of the culture. They are very capitalistic, or what they call in here profiteering. It's very much like a capitalist society where there's also large disparities of wealth. Whereas on his planet, Anaris, it's much more, it reads a lot more like communism or socialism. People sleep in dorms, people eat communally, no one has to pay for healthcare or for food. So it's about him being like a stranger in a strange land and being the fly on the wall, like figuring out what this place is. But what's really interesting about this narrative is that it flips back and forth. So it flips to the present of him being in Euros and figuring out what that world is. And then the next chapter will be kind of a flashback of what his life is like in Anaris. So you're getting to learn what these two worlds are through Shevek, flip-flopping a narrative from the past to the present and back again. And this was fascinating. This was a very much, I think, a conduit for Ursula K. Le Guin to just show us what this society, like what a functioning utopia, and I'm saying Anaris is the utopia in this case, what a functioning utopia might look like. And it was refreshing that she was showing what anarchism can look like, what benevolent anarchism can look like, but it also had flaws. Like it wasn't like she was like, this is so perfect over here and this is what it could be. It had flaws. There were things that were wrong. There were times where people went hungry. There was times where the labor was kind of uneven. The people who lived on Anaris were, well, I guess would all accounts be considered poor or didn't have as much as the people in Euros. But I think her point was that like they were rich in people. Like their relationships and their community was very strong. And that made up for the fact that they didn't have like fancy clothes and not a lot of possessions, because they were just much more built into community and in mutual aid, which is something I think we could be looking at. But again, she's not saying like that is a perfect system. There were obviously drawbacks. And then of course Euros is a little bit more like Earth, and so Shevek coming in and being like, hey, why are things this way? Why are things this way? Why are people don't have enough to eat? Like, what does that mean? Is her way of kind of showing us what is up with the with well, I guess the US, but with Earth. Why are things this way? It reminds me of when I read Herland by Elizabeth Perkins Gilman, which is a story about utopia, about these men who find this civilization of only women, it's just women, and they basically have like a socialist utopia. And the men are used as ways to be like, wait, we thought women did this, or why are things this way? And the women also being like, well, why do you subjugate your women to such terrible things? It was a way to undermine how the US system was run. And it just kind of highlights her ideas about what utopia could be and like what are the ills of the current society. And I kind of saw it was similar to this. Chevek was kind of that conduit to be like, why are things this way? And the reader goes, huh, yeah, why are things that way? This was very interesting. The plot was good. I felt the stakes for Chevek maybe could have been a little higher. I felt like he was in danger, but I didn't feel too badly like he was in danger. I maybe wanted like a little bit more of that. He at one point makes like a big impassioned speech, basically calling for revolution on Uras. And that results in like the government coming in and like mowing people down, which then of course the stakes were up. But even while he was hiding, I was like, I don't know. I just don't feel like he's in as much danger as someone like this would be. And luckily too, everything kind of ends well for him, which I did like because I liked Chevek as a character a lot. I actually didn't want to see any harm come to him. But I just wish the stakes were just I think they needed to be just ramped up maybe just a little bit. But at the end of the day, that might not have been, she wasn't really making a thriller. This is a sci-fi. I think this was a way for her to get a vehicle of ideas out. Like, the characters were really fleshed out. Again, Chevek was a great character. His partner is, what's her name? Takver? They all have very interesting names. Takver, yeah. Takver was a badass. I loved Takver. She is described as being, she's also a scientist, and she was just very independent and very, like, she had a duty to the planet and to what everybody was doing on the planet, but she also had a devotion to Chevek that in that world made sense. The people in their world are a little less monogamous, and no one's married, because married implies that there's property. People just kind of stay together or they don't stay together, but her devotion to him in that context felt still human and still felt very real. And she was just very like, I don't care what other people say. Like, you have to do what you have to do, Chevek. Like, you have to do what you have to do what's best for us, like for our family and for other people. She was great. And it was just fascinating. Like, the world building was really good. The first chapter, I remember being a little like, oh, this is a lot, because it's using a lot of made-up names. It's using, like, a little bit of lingo that's different from ours. So it took a little bit to get into it, but then once I was into it, I was into it. I really could not put this down. I especially loved the scenes that they showed of his childhood, because that's when you really start to get a sense of what the planet was like learning about what he learned about in school or how he lived as a child, because children don't live with their parents, they live in these dormitories with other children, was very interesting. There was a particular scene where he and some of his friends learn about what prisons are, because they don't have prison on their planet, but they learn about it, what it is like on Eurus. And the concept of prison to them and human cruelty is a new concept to them, so they decide to try it out and like create their own prison. And have, like, one of the kids is like, yeah, I'll go in the prison, I'll do it. And they kind of, like, leave him in there. And it just shows that even though they don't have this concept and the idea of inflicting suffering on a human being is a new concept to them, it's kind of innate. Like, it's kind of innate in human nature that if you have someone that you put into a hole and you're deciding is the prisoner, you're going to start to kind of treat him lesser than and treat him badly. But then when that kid finally comes out of the prison, they keep him in there for like 36 hours. When he comes out, he's like defecated everywhere, and they are horrified by what they did and what they've seen. And that kind of like and you know that because she's including that episode in this very early in the book, that has had some kind of profound effect on Chevek and how he sees the world. And again, it just shows that, like, even though they've come up with this very mutual aid, very like helpful society where everybody helps one another and no one has too much over someone else, that ability to be cruel is like still lodged in the human spirit. So some, like, every chapter just had some like fascinating ideas, and just fascinating ideas about how both of these societies work, how they work against each other, how they almost like how they like want to come together, but they just have such ideological differences that they can never quite be together. And Chevek's optimism and almost his naivete is a product of where he's come from. But then he comes in with kind of rose-colored glasses to Eurus, and then slowly realizes like, oh, you know what? No, this place is, maybe I've started something just by being here, but I can't be the one to bridge this, and I need to just return to what I know. This was great. This really was great. I will read more of her stuff. I think this is a loose series. I think there's other ones, and I might dive into that, but I definitely want to read The Left Hand of Darkness of hers, and some of the Earthsea series. So I really loved her writing. It was great. It was at times philosophical, it waxed philosophical, but it never got too heavy-handed. And I thought she like laid out the exposition and did the world building just beautifully. That I got invested, and I actually was understanding what this world was. So this was great. Dispossessed. We really enjoyed this. Great. So those are the books that I read for September. Again, it was a great month. The Pure and the Impure was but what are you gonna do? The rest of them were quite good. I just want to give a quick reading update about what I am currently reading. I am still going with War and Peace. I have kind of near the end at this point. I am at page 1041. And I'm just really taking my time. Like, I am really just enjoying taking my time with this and really savoring it. Because it's just gorgeous. It really is gorgeous. The parts, which I guess spoiler, but when Andrei Bolkonsky gets back with the Rostovs after he's been injured, and the scene with him and Natasha coming together, I was like, oh! Bolkonsky's still not my favorite character. I still get a little like, about him. But I gotta say, like, him and Natasha, I'm like, I do ship it. It's pretty good. Oh, but Sonia just released Nikolai. Oh, poor Sonia. I feel so badly for her. And also, the Countess, don't agree with how she's treated her at all. She basically took Sonia in, like, as her own child, and now is trying to, like, distance Sonia, or, like, tell her, like, remind her of her place, basically, because the family is losing money, which is not Sonia's fault or Nikolai's fault. It's their father's fault for how much money they're bleeding, and she needs Nikolai to marry someone who's better off, and Sonia's basically the poor relation. So she's basically been like forcing Sonia to release Nikolai from their engagement, and it's just so sad because I'm like, no, so all Sonia, like, Sonia loves this family so much and like loves him so much, but she's also like, I have to do what's right by these people that have helped me my whole life. And I just want to, like, please everybody and do the right thing, so. I'm so sad. Some spoilers, I guess, if you haven't read this book, but it's been so good. This has been so good that I almost, like I'm hanging on to the end, because I'm like, I just don't really want it to end. But I'm definitely going to read some more of this weekend. I think we'll probably start to wrap this up within the week. So, War and Peace. So good. And then I just finished, which will be in my October wrap up. I just finished Ragtime, which was so incredible. So incredible. And I just picked up the other day Hamet by Maggie O'Farrell. I have been wanting to read this for a very long time. My brother got this for me for Christmas, and I've just had it sitting forever, and I finally went, you know what, this feels very fall to me. I will pick it up. So far, it's great. I'm loving it so far. If you don't know this story, it's about Shakespeare's family, but Shakespeare himself is not named. He is a character, but he's not named in the book. And this is about his family, his wife, and then their daughter, and then they have two twins, one of whom is Hamet. And Hamet, unfortunately, this is not a spoiler, he passes away. And it's about the family's reaction to that. I was gonna start this book right after A Death in the Family, but I was like, that is too much death in the family. Like, that is too much, because it's almost the same thing. Someone in the family that is very loved passes away, and how is everybody reacting to it? I was like, I can't do that back to back. So I buffered it with The Dispossessed, which does not deal with that at all. And then I was like, okay, now we'll do it. We are in spooky season now, so I kind of want to wrap this up kind of quickly so I can move on to my spookier books. I'm thinking Mexican Gothic might be next. But so far I am really enjoying this. The language and the writing is very beautiful, kind of poetic, a little ornate, but I never shy away from that. But so far the characters are very distinct. I like get a sense of who everybody is. And this is just so far very good. I also love that the subtitle is Hamet, a novel of the plague. So I guess he will succumb to the plague. It is 1580, so it would be around the time. But this is, so far, I'm really liking this. This is very, very good. But it's also, it's too early to tell. I'm on page 38. I just picked it up. But yeah, Hamet. Alrighty. Thank you so much for coming along with me. Thank you. Yeah, I want to get more videos out. I've been slacking a bit, again, because I've been in the job search, and that's just taken up so much of my energy and my time. But now that I know that I am out of the woods in that, I'll still be adjusting to my new job, but I still will have a little bit more energy to do more videos. So, if you made it this far, thank you so much. This video, you can like it, you can comment on it, you can subscribe to my channel, you can share this video, you can do whatever you like. I hope you're reading something great, I hope you're enjoying the fall, and I will see you soon in the next video. Bye!